Hey everyone, and welcome. You're watching a special re-edit of the Sip&Talk podcast, brought to you by our friend Micky. We've packed all the key takeaways into just a few minutes for you. All right, let's jump right in. All right, today we are diving deep into one of the biggest, most talked about sci-fi sagas out there, Lou Cixoun's The Three-Body Problem. Now, this is a story that didn't just win the Hugo Award and get praise from people like Barack Obama. Oh no, it also kicked off a massive political firestorm. So that brings us to the big question, right? The puzzle we're going to try and solve today. How in the world did a story about aliens become this intense political battleground? I mean, it's seen in two completely opposite ways. It's wild. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so first, let's look at the interpretation that's really popular outside of China. For a ton of Western critics and readers, The Three-Body Problem is way more than just a sci-fi book. They see it as this powerful, bleak allegory, a sharp critique of authoritarianism. And where does this reading come from? Well, it all starts with the novel's opening, which, let me tell you, is absolutely brutal. We don't start with spaceships. We start on Earth, right in the middle of the violent chaos of China's Cultural Revolution. And that trauma, it just hangs over everything that comes next. This is where it gets really fascinating. You can see how readers draw these direct lines from the story to real-world politics. So you have a scientist who gets beaten to death by his own students. That's seen as a symbol for how political fanaticism just destroys itself. Then, the main character, Ye Wenji, she's been through so much trauma, she's so betrayed, she basically calls the aliens for help. And people read that as the ultimate act of despair, right? It's like saying, this system is so broken, let someone from the outside come and just burn it all down. And what about the aliens' sophons, these things that stop our science and listen to everything we say? Well, for many, that's a straight-up metaphor for state censorship, kind of like the Great Firewall. Okay, but, and this is a huge but, inside China, the story is read in a completely different way. I mean, like the total opposite. It's not seen as an anti-government critique at all. Instead, it's viewed as a kind of patriotic handbook, a parable for how the nation can survive in a really, really hostile world. So how do they get there from the same book? Let's break it down. So the key to this whole patriotic reading is the book's most famous and, frankly, most terrifying idea, the dark forest theory. The concept is pretty simple, but it will give you chills. Imagine the universe is a giant dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter, silently hiding behind a tree, holding a weapon. The second you make a sound, the second you reveal where you are, another hunter is going to take you out, no questions asked. Why? Because it's just safer to eliminate a potential threat than to risk finding out if you're friendly. In this universe, survival is literally the only thing that matters. So you might be asking, how does a creepy sci-fi idea turn into a real-world geopolitical strategy? Well, it's actually a pretty clear roadmap. Step 1, survival is everything. It comes before morality, before ideals, before anything else. Step 2, hide your true strength. You never, ever let your rivals know what you're really capable of. And step 3, you build up so much power, so much technological and military might, that attacking you would mean your enemy gets destroyed too. It's mutually assured destruction. And that's what keeps the peace. And this right here, this just lays it all out perfectly. In the book, it's called Cosmic Sociology, this cold, ruthless logic of the dark forest. Well, in the domestic interpretation, that's seen as a perfect model for real-world geopolitics. The world isn't a community. It's a zero-sum game. And to survive that game, you need a strong, centralized government that's totally focused on becoming dominant. It's just amazing. The same exact book is generating two completely different manuals for how the world works. So, okay, we have two totally conflicting ways to read this book. The obvious question is, what does the author, Lou Cixoun, actually think? And this is where the whole thing gets even more complicated, because his own words, his own interviews, seem to fly in the face of that anti-authoritarian reading. Take this quote from a really famous 2019 interview he did with The New Yorker. He said, if you were to loosen up the country a bit, the consequences would be terrifying. So right there, he's making it pretty clear he values order and strong government over, personal freedom. And he didn't stop there. He went even further, saying this: if China were to transform into a democracy, it would be hell on earth. I mean, wow. That's about as direct as you can get. And it creates this huge puzzle, right? How can the guy who wrote so powerfully about the horrors of the Cultural Revolution also say that democracy would be hell on earth? And then he made his most controversial statement. When asked about the state's policies in Xinjiang, he replied, "Would you rather that they be hacking away at bodies at train stations and schools in terrorist attacks?" Now, that comment caused a huge international backlash. To many in the West, it made him sound like he was defending the very state power that his books seemed to be criticizing. So, the author himself is a massive paradox at the center of all this. So where are we now? We're left with a single story that's acting like a mirror, and it's reflecting these huge, deep divisions in our world. And you can see this divide most clearly in how the media from different places talks about the book's main characters. This chart really just says it all. Let's look at the character Sanction. The New York Times sees her idealism and compassion as a fatal flaw that dooms humanity, maybe a metaphor for what some see as naive Western politics. In Chinese state media, she's also a warning that being soft is a weakness that needs to be stamped out by strong leadership. See? Same character, similar problem, totally different solution. Now, what about Thomas Wade, the get-it-done-at-any-cost guy? The NYT reads him as a critique of power without morality. But in Chinese media, he represents the necessary iron will to survive, where his brutality is seen as essential. It's just incredible. Two worlds looking at the exact same people and seeing opposite heroes and villains. Which brings us to our final thought. The three-body problem is a global sensation, but it seems like it's being read in two completely different languages, even when it's in the same language. So when one story can be seen as a desperate plea for freedom and a justification for absolute control, maybe the most important question isn't about aliens or distant galaxies. Maybe it's about us. What does the way we read the story reveal about the world we're already living in and about ourselves? If you want to dive deeper into this, be sure to subscribe to the full Sip and Talk podcast. And you can find a link to our sponsor Micky's channel right there in the description below. Thanks so much for watching.